1994. A simple yet beautiful morning as you're passing by the crowds on your way to work with your hot coffee and newspaper. As you begin to read the news, you learn that 94 wasn't just any ordinary year. It brought tragedy to F1 losing Ayrton Senna, a year that also had fans mourn over the loss of Kurt Cobain. But it was a year that served achievements.
Nelson Mandela and South Africa had traveled a long way to get to this moment.
Achievements that had wrote history in the books of 94 in FIFA, NFL, and even with Disney with Lion King. And just rising above the sun, there will be a serious competition beneath the surface. Manufacturers all around Europe competing in the British Touring Car Championship, putting their vehicles in their literal limits. With a young Richard Rydell and a strange Swedish company in the far corner in its competition, and to make sure that they were competitive, a wagon was just perfect. Many people know Volvo as a company whose mission is to be the safest car in the world, but what many don't know is that Volvo has always had a taste for adrenaline too. They have decided to go above all else to create something special. So special that it would leave a blueprint showing everyone who Volvo is, with one of their final flagship models being the Volvo V70 R. Okay, so this is the first time I've ever driven something this rare, and I am a previous owner of an MX-6. And technically speaking, my MX-6 is more rare to see on the road than this, unit-wise, but this is cooler in a sense. Before things get started, I think it's important to quickly talk about where Volvo started. Sweden. You may know it as a beautiful country with historic landmarks all around the country. However, they weren't just any ordinary country. As a quick highlight, Sweden's Air Force was a force to be reckoned with, being the only country that the United States entrusted to escort a broken SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest plane to have ever been built, and Sweden knew about their secret little plane. It all started in Gothenburg, where Volvo's first model, the OV4, was to be assembled. To this day, Volvo hasn't moved headquarters for almost 100 years. Assar Gabrielsson and Gustav Larsson were the founding fathers of the Swedish manufacturer. They made it a mission to be the primary manufacturer for the northern country and develop a vehicle for their people. As time kept pursuing, Volvo's success in Sweden began to expand towards the rest of the world. The PV444 was the first model from Volvo to surround a unibody platform, which helped expanded Volvo's purpose for safety and practicality. Not only were owners able to rely on Volvo's prophecy of efficiency and quality, they also had recognized that they were a better product compared to most of the competition. But here's the thing about Volvo. Like most companies back in the 50s and 60s, Advancements played a major role for them. Volvo was the very first to develop the 3-point seatbelt, which eventually became mandatory for every manufacturer to implement due to the improvement of safety. That again didn't stop Volvo. The 140 series and the 240 series had really began to blow up of Volvo's recognition of not only being affordable, but the safest around. Your catalytic converters, by the way. Yeah, thank Volvo for that too, as their 3-way catalytic converters had become mandatory for everyone else in the late 70s, and it reduced gases and emissions by 90%. Volvo didn't stop advancing, as their aerodynamics and smoother designs had started to play a major role with the unbelievably popular 850, the vehicle most would recognize as their beloved Shayla.
And this was one of the last iterations of the Volvo R series, essentially. This was the second generation of the V70 R and the last generation of the V70 R specifically. And the style of this thing is quite unique. It gives off a lot of boxy vibes, but also this was Volvo's new design language that they were going for at the time to actually start putting in more sleekness into the front end mainly. When you look at the S60, that's the sedan version of this essentially, you're going to see that it does have a lot of sleek and more bubbly designs, let's say, rather than just boxiness. So that's something that Volvo was going for a new direction for. And the regular cars, they did look boring. And even the performance models, they were very, very, very underrated.
Let's talk about the R series. A name you'd recognize if you know anything about Volvo. While safety and practicality was a priority for Volvo, they wanted to have their fun too. So they decided to get some help to begin a performance model with Porsche? Yes, Porsche did play a key role in the development of the 850R sedan and wagon. And using their 5-cylinder was a perfect mix of turbocharging performance and yeah, that too. The A50R introduced a more fun side of a boring Swedish company. It was by no means a direct M3 or M5 competitor, but rather a start to something special. That specialty to help Volvo establish themselves in racing and add different features in the inside. It didn't necessarily feel like a performance car inside, but had certain features to feel like one. At the same time, feeling premium. You did not feel like you were sitting in something cheap. And the 240 horsepower helped it keep feeling premium, but it only began to advance from there.
Now it's time that I should talk about the powertrain that's powering the V70R. This is a 2.5-liter turbocharged 5-cylinder that does, at factory, produce 300 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. This is either mated with a 5-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual like this particular one is set up. And it's powering all the wheels in the V70. Now, for me to just talk about the basics of this powertrain would be stupid, because this was an evolutionary thing that Volvo was doing to actually compete with the M3 or even the C63 at the time, or I'm sorry, the CL55 AMG at the time, because the C63 didn't exist yet. But there was a lot more advancements, especially with the adaptive suspension and the all-wheel drive system that Volvo did for the S60 and V70R. And let's talk about that.
The S60R and V70R was the first to introduce the 4C active suspension and Haldex all-wheel drive system. These systems would run simultaneously through the chassis with sensors placed all around each corner of the vehicle, the first of its kind. Within milliseconds, these sensors would detect anything between road surface, braking, and even steering inputs in order to calculate the control needed for the suspension to adjust at proper timing. The Haldex all-wheel drive system was a front bias system, mostly running 90% of the power in the front wheels, but would provide 50-50 if needed depending on what the car senses on the road. This is not only to help performance of the V70R, but also help to develop vehicles in the future for Volvo's lineup.
I don't know if you can hear that on camera, dude, but like the noises that this thing is making. Yes, I mean, it has a colder intake, it does have a blow-off valve, it has an exhaust, I'm able to experience what really a turbocharged 5-cylinder is really supposed to sound like, essentially. But it's just a fact of the matter that Volvo made something like this and sold it to the public. Volvo's known to make a safe car. Their priority is safety. And they were the first company to actually make seatbelts standard, like the seatbelts on your shoulder and everything like that. And they really made the tradition of having safety as a main priority for any vehicle. Even the modern performance cars today, they still have a certain regulation that they have to pass when it comes to safety. And when it comes down to just everything inside this car, this thing actually feels really, really good in the inside. Like, it does feel very refined. It does feel pretty quiet in here, and it does feel relatively solid, surprisingly. But the one thing that just kind of throws me off is it's a Volvo and it's a turbocharged wagon that has all-wheel drive. It's not something that I'm used to hearing. And one thing that I can say is, oh my god, this sounds so good. I'm gonna just do a small pull. I'm not gonna redline this thing, but oh my god, I'm not even punching it, and this thing is just stupid, dude. Look, it's not fast, okay? 300 horsepower nowadays is like 150 horsepower back in 2006. Okay, this is not fast by any standards today, and this is talking as a Gen Z, as I'm about to turn 23. Okay, I don't really care that this thing is not fast in modern standards. I love the fact that this thing is making stupid noises. It's relatively quick for what it is, and it's fun, and it's a wagon. Okay, I don't understand why wagons were never sold in the United States and why you didn't buy them. This is so stupidly fun. I don't understand this, but
getting in the inside of the V70 R, this was at the time where Volvo was also shifting their design language in the interior, but it still felt very Volvo inside. I will tell you, the seating position in here is phenomenal. For me being 6 feet tall, I actually see out very clearly. Even with some of the big pillars in here that are quite thick, it's not as many blind spots as you think. And it's just, given the fact that this thing is a wagon, it is very long in the inside as well. Seating position, phenomenal. The seats, I've heard some of the owners say that these are some of the most comfortable seats, and I will agree that it is one of the most comfortable seats that I've sat in. It is ridiculously comfortable in here. I was actually quite surprised at how good this thing was. Anyways, talking around the rest of the interior, this was at the time where Volvo was improving their interior quality, but at the same time, there was still a lot of plastics. There was still a lot of nook and crannies in here that didn't exactly emphasize of what Volvo's quality is today. If you sit inside of a modern Volvo, the quality is unbelievable inside. Here, it's old Volvo for sure. There's a lot of plastics everywhere, but that doesn't mean that this interior is bad. In fact, it's still quite good. And in fact, most of the things in here are quite simple to use. There's a lot of switches in the middle of the center console area. Right in front of your Spaceball shifter, you're going to also have your dual zone climate control, your normal AC controls, which it's not organized well at all in here, but this was at the time where Volvo was changing and they were trying to assort more luxurious features in here, as both of these seats in the front are actually power adjusting. You also do have your sunroof up top. And when it comes to your gauges, because of this being the V70 R, they are blue tinted gauges and they look so gorgeous in here. The steering wheel, it looks just like a normal V70, but you're going to also have your R badge. And this is one of the few indications inside of a V70 R that you know you're driving something very quickly. And pretty much the rest of the interior, it's quite simple. There is enough back seat room for a full grown adult to fit, but it's quite claustrophobic in here. Even though this vehicle is long, it's not an insane amount of backseat room. The trunk is ginormous. You can fit a crap ton of stuff in there, to the point that you could probably fit a cabinet if you so please do. So as long as you have the seats down, of course, it can fit a lot of stuff in the back. And that's the benefit that you get with a station wagon comparing to a normal sedan like the S60. That said, I'm done talking about the interior because there's still features in here that they're quite ancient at this point. Some things in here are quite unique. I will give the quirks and features to Doug DeMuro, as he's reviewed an S60R, and he's done a way better job than me, as he's been doing this for a lot longer than I have.
I kid you not, this is probably like minute 6 of my driving of this car. I'm literally just starting to drive this car as I just finished filming and everything like that, doing all the B-roll shots. So really, what is it like to drive? Honestly, the size of this car, given the fact that it is long, doesn't really feel big at all. It actually, because of this being lowered, it does feel like it's a lot lower than what it's supposed to be. I'm not used to the height of that, and I'm also not used to the fact that there is a gigantic hatchback behind me. So when it comes to blind spots in here, you don't really struggle with many at all. Rev matching is very easy in here. The clutch is a little funky, and that feel like it has to do with just the transfer case. Given the fact that this is all-wheel drive, it is a little bit clunky, and I don't think it has to do with just the car. I just think it has to do with the characteristics of just the age, really. So I'm not gonna bash on that, but just the clutch feel, very easy to engage. The shifter, super smooth. I know exactly what gear I'm going into, and the noises that you're hearing in here. You do these type of modifications in this car, you're gonna get these type of noises. And how can you? I will never ever get tired of turbo noises in any vehicle. I know turbos are becoming boring nowadays, but oh my god, when you make it sound like this, it just makes you change your pants again.
Here's something that I will point out. The turning radius is quite horrendous.
Holy crap, this turning radius is bad. Put me on a chokehold.
I'll say this, my 2003 Toyota Sequoia has an equal to better turning radius than the Volvo, and that is a near 6,000 pound SUV. Another thing I'm going to point out is fuel mileage. Granted, this car is modified so it could be better stock, but I have never seen the needle of a fuel gauge legitimately move down immediately just from driving it around for 15 minutes. And sure as hell, the V70 achieved that today with me just driving it around. Oh, and that's also coming from someone who dailies a V8, by the way. It's bad. Most V70 owners have also reported that they aren't that great in gas either. Most doing around 18 to 19 miles a gallon just on average, which for a 5-cylinder, it's pretty atrocious. Lastly, though this car handles well considering the weight, it's quite numb. And what I mean by numb, the steering. Of course, I wasn't expecting this thing to act like a Miata or something that provides immediate feedback when going around the corners, but I was sure shocked to realize how numb the steering really was. It's not the end of the world, but if you were expecting this thing to handle anything like a German Titan, or expect the feedback that you get from your little GTI or Civic Type R, don't. It's a fast station wagon that's able to cruise at Autobahn at over 150 miles an hour with ease, not necessarily tearing down the Nürburgring like a GTI or the Type R, though it can. Speaking of Germans, wrong German. What? Comparing to its competition, this isn't exactly what you'd assume of a driver's car. Hear me out. No, it's just a tad different. BMW. Renowned to be the ultimate driving machine, and if you ask any BMW owner, they would proudly agree with you in that statement. That's without showing you a 10,000 page document of repairs they've had to endure, or them pulling up any 5-ton M5 with a powertrain that by itself weighs more than a Miata. Jokes aside, they will tell you that it is an experience you can only feel inside of pure precision. Sure, it's 2000. BMW has just released a machine that will begin a shift to the German manufacturer to becoming the pinnacle of German engineering. The E46 M3. The E46 not only set off a new direction for the company, but it also started a new chapter for BMW's history as a whole. The M division was already developed as a Titan of its own, but the E46 just extended it of what M is today. And with 8,000 RPM of cylinder deliciousness, most would say it's quite lustful. Mercedes also introduced their take on a sports sedan with a C55 AMG 2005, which also showed off a direction for Mercedes identifying of what German muscle really was.
It wasn't as drivers focused comparing to the E46, but it was for sure one hell of a monster of its own right, allowing owners to get a taste of burnouts, donuts, drifting, screaming V8s in a freaking Mercedes. Volvo had to make sure that this was a good investment, not only adding more power and all-wheel drive to the mix, but introducing a new section of technology for the world to see. The amount of technology Volvo had packed in a mid-sized station wagon back in 2003 is incredible, but that led to a cost. Weight. Coming in at 3,700 pounds, which is over 200 pounds heavier than the E46 M3. That, of course, had made it much more difficult to put it around the corners, but thanks to Volvo's all-wheel drive system and suspension technology, it definitely assisted the driver's feedback. The big flaws comparing to the V70 and the M3 is, well, the M3 just feels more analog. It doesn't have as much technology packed inside and driving aids like the Volvo does, and it's a 90-day difference behind the wheel. And well, you can also spin the ass out of the M3. The Volvo, you just can't. The E46 also revved to 8,000 RPM, which not only did the M3 had more character overall, but it was just overall a better driver's car considering the stats. But looking at what these companies make nowadays, I definitely take back what I said.
It's sad to see cars that are not made like this anymore today, and honestly, it's a shame that Volvo has completely changed their ways of what their priorities are. Granted, safety has always been a big priority that they have, and I'm not going to take that away because they've made some very important evolutionary changes that I really think that should have been a change for, in the automotive industry. However, completely going into EV, it sucks. Polestar is an EV company, and Volvo doesn't make 5 cylinders anymore. They make a twin charge 4 cylinder that eventually is going to go away, but you're not going to have this anymore. And it sucks. It really, really does suck. But this is now something that honestly can be appreciated. The fact that Porsche had helped Volvo really at the time to make a performance wagon with the A50 R, and the fact that they also raced a wagon in against other manufacturers at the time, and the fact that something like this exists even in modern day is just something that you really have to appreciate. Yes, there is a Type R out there. It's a great hot hatchback. There is a GR Corolla. I just recently driven one. Drives great. It's fun to drive. There is also the Elantra N, which I really do think that is a great iteration of a modern, fun car, really, essentially, for being less than 40 grand. Thank God there's something still existing like that. But something like the S650 Mustang, it's completely different now. Thank God it has a V8 in it, but it's so much technology in there that you kind of forget what personality it has anymore. It's not the same like what it used to be. And this Volvo, it's such a different character in here. You kind of tend to forget that you're driving a freaking Volvo. Oh my God, dude, this noise, I cannot get rid of this noise. This is just... Oh man, I love this car. I really do like this car. The fact of the matter that something like this exists, the noises that are created in this car is just... I don't know how to describe it, dude.
Tracking down how many V70Rs that were sold in the United States was not easy, due to the fact that it was a limited run. Less than 3,000 units were actually here in the United States, and Europe just had a little bit more than us. And finding a pristine condition one is even more difficult. See, the common problems with the R models were the suspension and all-wheel drive system, let alone maintaining one comes with just a whole other mission of everything. Maintaining one is not cheap, and it will cost you quite a bit of money to just keep one running well. So finding a V70R with OEM suspension and a working all-wheel drive system is already a mission to itself, and most owners had already swapped them out or taken them out because they didn't need them to keep running. What also makes the S60R and V70R unique is the specs you are offered when purchasing one. Take a look at this particular one. The Sonic Blue just pops out beautifully with the sun, and this Gobi interior gives off just a great accent in the inside. But say you didn't like this spec. There were 3 different color options you were given in the interior: Nordcap, Gobi, and Atacama. This particular color being the rarest one. These small little details is what makes the V70 and S60 gems in the car world. Outside from the unique engineering techniques Volvo had taken, finding a rare spec R model adds to the specialty of these vehicles. And finding a V70 R with an Atacama interior and a Space Mall manual is like catching a colossal squid on camera. Odd comparison, I know, but it's really true. They're just never around. And that's what makes this car so special. Not by just being a sleeper under the radar, but by being a hot wagon only a select few are aware of that it exists.
These are getting really hard to find nowadays. And if you manage to find one, enjoy it while you can. These are not easy to maintain. I'm not going to sit here and say that Volvos are really reliable cars and stuff. Yes, they have a reputation of being reliable, but that doesn't mean that they're cheap to maintain. The V70 R has its common fair share of issues. Like I've explained already, the PCV, the all-wheel drive system, the adaptive suspension that this thing has eventually goes out. And this thing having 160,000 miles already had the suspension swapped because it's extremely expensive to replace that. And you might as well just buy an aftermarket suspension that is just as good and you're done with it. You don't have to deal with the crap ton of sensors that this thing comes with automatically. But just the experience that you get with something like this, it's not something that you're going to be able to feel anymore today. And the fact of the matter that something like this has existed at some point, that you can buy brand new, and this was existing brand new when I was literally a little kid. I was like 2 or 3 years old when this came out, or 4. But if you have the chance to buy one and you can afford to maintain it, make this car last.
This has been by far one of the most unique documentaries I've yet to make in this channel. The V70 R is a wagon I have drooled over, wanting to have the opportunity to at least come close and experience the 5-cylinder madness a company just so far away had decided to develop for a limited group of people. The V70 R is not just a daily driver. It's not just a driver's car. It's a unit. A unit that can pulsate over 150 miles an hour and not giving a damn to keep up with the Ferrari 360 at the Autobahn slate to prove that Sweden can build something. Something that not only meant to be safe, but an evolution of what we now have today with cars engineered to predict radical movements of drivers, accepting the abuse of top speed, harsh turns, dumping clutches and shredding gears, destroying tires, and pushing vehicles to the absolute limit. Volvo didn't just build a hot wagon, they built a purpose. A purpose that introduced the world to what significant caffeine and giant cinnamon rolls can really produce, producing the most insane machinery and advances known to mankind and not caring who's offended. Remember, Sweden was the only country in the world to have ever escorted the SR-71 Blackbird, minus the United States. Volvo might be changing directions, but they will always be that one company